Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. Let's talk for a little bit about the Los Angeles Lakers. I came into this season thinking that this team was a championship contending squad. I was higher on them than most people, especially because I love their offseason. I called them one of the biggest winners of the entire offseason when they made their big moves. And some of these moves included bringing back key guys from last year's second half run where they went to the Western Conference Finals, like D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, who was great in the half season he played there, as well as Austin Reeves, getting him on what seemed like a steal of a contract. They also made some interesting additions. Gabe Vincent came over from Miami, where he was a big part of them going to the finals, gave them a little bit more depth at the guard position. Taurean Prince was really good in Minnesota. I like the idea of him as a bit of a 3-and-D wing, just the ideal player it felt like to play alongside a guy like LeBron as well as Anthony Davis. Jackson Hayes gave them some athleticism in the front court, just another playable big out there, which is something they definitely needed, as well as Christian Wood. He was interesting coming in here with a potential smaller role on the table. Christian Wood's never been great in those bigger roles, but I felt like maybe he could contribute in a new way, and Cam Reddish as well, just taking a flyer on a guy that has had a ton of opportunities, but has never quite hit his potential. And it felt like a pretty good squad that they built over there. They had some actual continuity for once, rather than making the big star trade. They stuck to their guns, kept a good supporting cast overall around their stars in LeBron and Anthony Davis, and went ahead and gave it a chance. I think I predicted them to be a top 3 seed in the Western Conference. I believe I had them going to the conference finals as well, but the dominance I was expecting never really materialized throughout this season. They spent a lot of the year hovering right around 500, dealt with some injuries, haven't been a top 6 seeded team since December 14th. They did win the in-season tournament, which I forgot about, honestly, until I even started making this video, but that is a win in its own right. They won the inaugural NBA Cup, but we haven't seen the dominance they showed in that tournament run very often throughout the season. Although last year we saw something kind of similar to this, where they started off pretty bad, or at least not as good as they were hoping to be, hovered right around 500 until the deadline, where they made big acquisitions, and then after the All-Star break, they really turned it up, and of course went on that Western Conference Finals run. And it seems like they may be, for some reason, trying to do the exact same thing. I don't know why they insist on this method, but I guess it worked last year. Maybe it could work again. Since the All-Star break, they're 14-7. That's tied for the 5th best record in the league over that stretch, and the 3rd best amongst Western Conference teams. They're tied with Minnesota, and only behind Oklahoma City and Denver, and those other 3 squads are, of course, the top 3 teams in the West so far this season. The Lakers are also 8-1 over their last 9 games. Hasn't been the most difficult stretch in the world. They've played some pretty easy squads. Just beat up on the Wizards tonight as I'm recording this, and the Raptors the day before. But wins are wins, and even earlier in the season, they were getting blown out by teams that they shouldn't be losing to. So it's definitely a big improvement in the right direction. And part of this improvement has been a big pivot towards an offensive squad. A lot of the Darvin Ham era, and really just the whole LeBron 80 era in general, has been them being this lockdown defensive juggernaut and being pretty abysmal on offense on most nights. Over these past 21 games or so, they flipped the script. Instead, they are a great offensive team. They're the 5th best offense in the NBA since the All-Star break. It has come at the expense of the defense, though. They've been bottom 10 in that regard over that same period. I think they're better than that defensively. I mean, they have Anthony Davis. They've shown an ability to lock up a lot of other times throughout the season, especially when it matters most. So I'm not super worried about the defense. I think it's a bit better than that, and I'm way more encouraged by the offensive progress that they've made throughout the year. They're picking up a lot of steam and starting to look more and more like the contender I thought they would be coming into the season, and they're peaking at the right time. They feel like they're going to go into the playoffs potentially with a lot of momentum. But while the playoffs are obviously the goal in making a run, they are still in a bit of a precarious spot because while they've been doing a lot of winning, so is the rest of the Western Conference. It's one of the most stacked Wests I can imagine. Everybody is a ton of games above 500. Nobody is losing consistently. So the Lakers, despite again being 8-1 over their last 9 games, are still the 9 seed. If the season ended today, they would have to win 2 games to even make the playoffs in the first place against some great squads. Now, luckily enough for the Lakers, while they haven't moved up in the standings, they have shortened the gap quite a bit. At the moment, they're just 1 game back of Sacramento for the 8th seed, and just 1.5 games back of the Suns and Pelicans at 6 and 7. They're also technically only 2 games back of Dallas at the 5 spot, but the Mavericks are on fire, and there's only 5 games left for the Lakers to play, so making up that gap is a little bit too little too late if you ask me, but it's not impossible for the Lakers to still grab one of those 6, 7, or 8 spots. They do have a tough schedule remaining. They play the Timberwolves, the Cavaliers, the Warriors, Grizzlies, and Pelicans to close out the season. They're going to have to lock in, especially in that Pelicans game, because that's one of the top teams I feel like they could potentially push out of their spot. If they get that win, that would be huge. And the teams ahead of them also have hard schedules. The Kings have one of the most difficult. The Suns have the hardest schedule remaining. Pelicans one isn't that hard, but again, they at least face them head to head, so that helps them control their own destiny a little bit. They've got a real chance to make a run up the standings in these final games. They dug themselves into a hole, but they're working their way back out. And I think if they could go ahead and move up at the very least to a 7 or an 8 spot, it could go a long way to them trying to replicate last year's run, especially if they somehow find their way to the 6th seed. Even if they do end up as a playing team again like they were last season, I still think this Lakers team has as good a chance of anyone in the first round against one of those top squads in this playing team range. They've got a lot of things that make them intimidating, that make me feel like a lot of people would pick them to win a first round series, and I don't blame people if they think this Lakers team is still capable of some kind of run. Mainly because they still do have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, who are an all-NBA duo. They're both going to be an all-NBA team, and still one of the most elite duos in the entire sport. LeBron James, I guess you could say, is declining. The defense is definitely not what it used to be, but offensively is still ridiculous. 25 points per game, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists, shooting over 40% from 3. He's out shooting Steph Curry from downtown actually this season. Had a game against the Nets recently where he hit 9 threes. He does have a little bit of an ankle injury that's bothering him, but it doesn't seem to be hindering him as much as last year's was, where he was really banged up going into the playoffs. So he's a bit healthier. He's playing at a high level, just like he has over the past 50,000 years of his career. You've always got a shot when LeBron James is on your team. His ability to step it up in the biggest moments, like we saw in the in-season tournament, and we've seen at multiple times against some of the best squads in the league this season, I still think he has that X factor to him, even though he isn't quite the unanimous best player in the world he used to be. Still don't want to face LeBron James in a series if I'm one of the top teams. Anthony Davis is again having another stellar season, 25 points per game, 13 boards, 4 assists, a steal, 2.5 blocks roughly, one of the best defenders in the world. A lot of people tell you he is the best, if that's your opinion. I mean, I don't blame you with the stuff that he does out there. One of the best rim protectors, great on the perimeter, just a complete game breaker. Down low especially, prevents teams from even getting to the basket, even thinking about trying to score when they get down there in the first place. The one problem is they need a bit more consistency from him offensively. Has been better as of late. He's in a great stretch at the moment. They need this AD going forward, and if they can get that, as well as the version of Ron they've been getting for a majority of the season, these two guys are as scary of a duo as anyone to face off against in a playoff series. Not to mention the supporting cast is pretty good. It's not perfect. They definitely don't have the best depth in the world, but I think they have enough guys to give them a lot of options in a playoff series. D'Angelo Russell, for example, is having his best season in a long time. 18.2 points per game at 3 boards and 6 dimes, shooting 42% from 3, and he's been averaging 20 points, 4 rebounds, and 7 assists on knockdown outside shooting since February 1st. Really, leading up to the trade deadline, like the week before when he was in all these rumors, D'Lo basically said, I'm going to go out there and prove that they don't need to trade me, that I can be the point guard for this team. And he did that, and has been one of the biggest reasons why they've been so good offensively, why they've been cooking recently. He is fantastic. Now, they're going to need this out of him in the playoffs, because last year he took a major dip after playing pretty well for the Lakers to end the regular season. So they need him to be consistent. They need him to be this D'Lo and not last year's playoff D'Lo that got benched. But if this D'Lo does show up, it makes the Lakers way more dynamic offensively, and I think overall he's been a pretty good fit for this team and has shown why they made the right decision in keeping him in the offseason. Austin Reeves is having a really good year, building off last year's second half breakout, 16 points, 4 rebounds, and 6 dimes per game. Rui's been fantastic, 13, 4, and 1, shooting 42% from deep. Really, this whole team has been knocking down the 3 ball at a ridiculous clip. They've moved all the way up to 7th in the NBA in overall 3-point percentage. They don't shoot a lot, shoot one of the lowest amounts in the league, but just having guys that can consistently knock down outside shots that LeBron and AD generate from attacking inside is critical to the success of any LeBron-led team, and it feels like the Lakers have finally found a formula that works with the shooters surrounding LeBron, so that's been huge for them. Other guys who have contributed have included Taurean Prince, been pretty up and down. He's wildly inconsistent, but theoretically does give them some shooting. Jackson Hayes, again, been a solid energy big. Spencer Dinwiddie, who they picked up recently, has had some good moments, hasn't been great, but has, again, had moments where he's stepped up, like specifically the game against the Bucks that they won without LeBron or AD playing. He was pretty big. Cam Reddish has had some moments as well. Not all these guys are going to play. Again, their depth isn't fantastic, but I think they've got some interesting options. The spacing is there. They've got some interesting defenders, and they're getting some more guys back who I think are going to help in this regard too. Gabe Vincent recently returned after a super extended absence, is still trying to find his footing, and I don't know how he's going to look in a playoff series because, again, he hardly played this season, but theoretically could be a bolstering piece to their bench guard rotation. Jared Vanderbilt is also reportedly close to coming back, and I think his defense would help a lot with that defensive slippage we've seen from them since the All-Star break, and they're going to need a guy like that when they go up against great offensive talents like you talk about what Denver can bring to the table, or Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Phoenix potentially in a playing game if they have to face them, Sacramento, Golden State even. They just need a guy like Vando who can just go out there and get them consistent stops, so I think he could be big coming back. And yeah, I feel like the Lakers are just figuring it out. They've got a pretty good squad. They're finding their rhythm at the right time, have that top-end talent to go with the supporting pieces, got a wealth of experience across this roster, whether it's making deep playoff runs or just carrying over a team from last year that made a run to the Western Conference Finals under potentially similar circumstances if they do end up as a playing team. I think they could still be a threat against some of the top teams. I'm still holding on to the belief at the beginning of the season that the Lakers were extremely dangerous, especially with what they've been showing me recently. I know it hasn't been against the best competition in the world, but I don't want to bet consistently against a team that has LeBron, Anthony Davis, a pretty solid supporting cast. Really the biggest flaw with this team to me is the coaching. I think Darvin Ham is just not a good coach. The adjustments have been bad earlier on the season. They were outright awful. Some of the starting lineups he threw out there made no sense. I don't trust him as a coach that much. That's one of the biggest concerns. But in terms of just the straight talent on the roster, I think it's all there for the Lakers to make some first-round series really interesting and potentially pull off an upset and try and go on another run. They're the biggest wild card in the Western Conference to me because they could either somehow put together another Western Conference Finals run. I think it is possible, or they could miss the playoffs straight up. I mean, facing against the Golden State Warriors in a 9-10 game isn't the most ideal scenario. Steph Curry could easily go out there and drop 30 or 40 on your heads. Draymond Green could play some great defense, say Klay Thompson gets hot, and boom, all of a sudden you're sitting at home on the couch while the Warriors are moving on to the next playing game to try and make things happen. And even if you beat them, if you stay in that 9 spot, you then have to face, the Kings or the Suns or the Dallas Mavericks, the New Orleans Pelicans, all these really good teams that could also beat you in a game, and they would have home court advantage. So if the Lakers want to really make this thing happen and make it a potential possibility, I think they've got to try and push their way out of this 9-10 matchup if they can, win some games down the stretch, continue this rhythm, win that first playing game to grab a 7 seed, and then you can maybe pull off some magic again like you did last season from a similar spot. It's going to be really interesting to watch them the rest of the way. They're truly the wild card in the Western Conference. Some people really believe in them and think they could win the Western Conference, and some people think they're complete frauds and that they have no business even being in the playoffs in the first place. It's insane. I will say they should also avoid the Denver Nuggets at all costs because I think Denver just has their number. They would probably sweep the Lakers, but if they avoid Denver, anything could potentially be possible. They're just really interesting to me because, again, I just never want to bet against a team that has LeBron, Anthony Davis on it. A good supporting cast, I would say, not the best in the world, but definitely one that's been better than some years past. They're extremely interesting. I love what they've been doing as of late. If they get Jared Vanderbilt back and Gabe Vincent kind of finds his rhythm, they get even better. They're peaking at the right time like they did last season. Again, I don't know why they insist on being bad for a lot of the year and then suddenly saying after the deadline, oh, hey, let's be good again. But it's what they like to do in this Darvin Ham era. We'll see if it translates into a potential playoff run. Let me know down below in the comments if you think they can go on a run this season, or if you think that they're cooked, that they're going to lose in the play-in, or even if they end up in a first-round playoff series that will get swept or just lose in pretty succinct fashion. Would love to know your opinions on that. What is their ideal matchup in the first round too? Which of the top teams do you think they would have the best chance against? I appreciate you watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Appreciate you watching. I'll see y'all later. Peace.